in outside and, internal efforts to knock down the weeds. There is crews or one-time crews or that Mr. Warburton uses every year in October to clear out V-ditches. So I believe that's also a function of the LMD, or funded technically out of the LMD right now. So yes, if the LMD itself goes away in a couple years and it's not renewed, then another funding source will have to cover that as well. Now, the GAD can pay for it, but the GAD doesn't have enough money at this time.
Mm-hmm. And then can you walk us through a little bit more on the tiers of assessments that you said? So you said that it was less, I don't know what's wrong with my throat, in the flat areas and around $83 or so in the hills, and that we can possibly consider tiering it based on the risk of the residents in the GAD. Can you walk us through that?
Sure. So Oakhurst was developed over multiple subdivisions over many years. So different subdivisions get added in at certain times. And so when the GAD was created, they set certain assessment amounts that they worked with the developer prior to the homes being sold. They set, and so like the areas around Indian Wells, in the flat areas, I believe, were built, I believe, earlier than the homes in the hills. Those were set around $25, or it's currently at $25. I don't remember what it was in 1990, but that's what it is today. Now, the homes like in Peacock Creek, those subdivisions, those got assessed at a higher rate, and so those property owners pay more. You could, and like I said, it's a weighted 50% majority. So, someone who's paying more, their vote technically counts a little bit more. You could add more tiers. You could just change the amount you want to add to each of those three tiers. Say the $25 one just goes up 10% versus the ones up in the hills that are certainly probably at more risk than the ones down below. I don't know exactly what risk analysis was done to set the rates. That I haven't looked into specifically, but you could add that as a factor in to your analysis. But anytime you're trying to thread the needle with these different amounts, it takes a lot of time and effort, and that's cost, right? So, but I do think it's reasonable to assume that you probably want to have some kind of tiered system still to sort of balance out the risk that is inherent out in the Oakhurst development. And the more likelihood of folks that have less risk that get a lesser increase are more likely to vote appropriate, in favor of the ballot.
Well, and I just want to say one of the other things I asked Larry earlier today in conjunction with that is, and this kind of goes into our housing element, but any new developments that are being built in the GAD could potentially be additional properties that are assessed if they're not excluded.
Yeah, so right now there's an overlay of the lots that are within the GAD. Most of them are comprised of the single-family homes and some multifamily. There are some open spaces that are technically owned by the city or
Recording
the GAD,
in
depending
progress.
on the location. But the country club, for example, is not in the GAD, so they are not being assessed. They actually have that parking lot parcel right at Peacock Creek and Clayton Road that they are looking to potentially develop with 24 townhomes. But that is not currently in the GAD, so they wouldn't be automatically subjected to the GAD assessment. But they could be conditioned to be put into the GAD. That's an element of that's typical in any land development type process. But it's not automatic because their sort of mother lot is not in the GAD right now.
So from us, what are you looking for from us tonight then?
cognizant of the time, so I want to make sure that we give you the feedback and direction that you need.
Yeah, I would say this is, we would recommend that what's in the existing plan of control with some updates would be what we would like to base our initial, cost for developing a future ballot, and not downgrade it at this point. It'll be problematic if we're not specifically looking for something. I think you're going to leave yourself open to liability and exposure at that point for saving maybe a lot, saving $20 or whatever it is. I think it's going to be a pretty, has to be some significant increase. How it's done over time, I think, is a discussion we have in the future, but I would suggest we at least hit the planning at the $250,000 level at a minimum, and recognizing that if you don't, that will at least let us finish the plan of control. If you want to have the discussion about setting a reserve and capital replacement costs of adding to that sort of dollar amount we're going to ask voters, we could do that later. I don't mean to kick the can down the road, but that's not really a discussion of the plan of control. That's more of a operations of the district. So it would be helpful for us to know, okay, is there any changes that the board would like to make on the plan of control or have concerns about? And if you have specific questions about, what the monitoring or what it entails, we have the geotechnical folks here that can give you the details about it. So that's what we're looking for, is making sure that what we're pursuing on the plan of control is what the board wants. So when we put it in a draft form for approval to you, that it's not a surprise.
Well, I read the 2024 version, and I mean, that seems like a fair level of activity for the GAD if it were properly funded, right?
Yes.
And so I think going along with the same order of operations that we talked about earlier, if we update the plan control, it's essentially bringing it current. It's not making, I don't think it's making significant changes here. Other than this thing that is, there's one section here that is not specifically required in the current plan of control, and then we're adding that in 2024 version. That seems like
That's the
only
capital
substantive
replacement,
change.
right?
Yeah.
So if
Which
you-
seems fair.
I would recommend it, otherwise you're going to not have the money whenever it happens, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say that we would give direction to adopt or, take steps to adopt the 2024 version here that's in the right column in the materials. And then as you move forward, but as we do that adoption, I would include language that says this is only active if,
Okay.
there's adequate funding. And if there isn't, all of this is, will be prioritized somehow and pretty much not happen.
I think I'll need to work with Mala on if it's in the plan of control or is it more in the ballot language. I think I recognize that.
I mean, that's the goal.
Yeah.
We'll let you
Yeah,
figure out how to
it
do
doesn't
that.
pass. They need to know, the voters need to know, okay, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah,
And
because
so-
almost immediately then we'll
Yes.
curtail.
Understood. Okay.
That's the direction I would go. I don't know if there's,
Do you need a motion from us, or? Oh, public comment, yeah.
yes. So, okay, so that's all of our questions. And, or we could have more questions, but let's take public comment. And then we'll go. Mr. Kelleran, you have a card in your hand.
Thank you. Jim Kelleran?
Happy holidays to all the council members and city workers, and to Larry. I didn't come here with any planned comments. I wanted to hear what Larry said. I did read all the materials. This is really between doing what's right versus doing what legally is right. I am one of only 1,400 homeowners that come to this meeting to talk about this, and I'm well-versed on this topic over the last 25 years. This will not pass, okay? No matter what you put in, I think, Jeff, you nailed it down. from a practical viewpoint, the right thing is for people to support the jihad. It's our responsibility to support it. But I can tell you from talking to my neighbors in high-risk areas that are on the hills, they're not going to support it. And so you are wasting money in that sense because it's just not going to pass. On the second part of the issue here is when you look at the legal liability, the comment was that people would not vote to support, to basically get rid of the jihad. I would tell you, you would most likely get that support more than voting for the jihad. And let me explain to you why you would do it. It's all about how you message. And again, I'm not saying I support this, but understand this topic here. There is a legal liability to the homeowners as long as this district is in place. And if it wasn't for Prop 218, which requires a public vote on these fees, you would be responsible for that $10 million or $5 million for those to get that open space corrected. So there's a huge liability if 218 was to be reversed. And all of a sudden, this jihad is in place. All of a sudden, that money would have to be funded through the jihad. And as a district, you would have to hold all those 1,400 homes responsible for fixing that cost. So again, it's Prop 218 that has really put the clamps on how this district should function. But like I said, it is more likely that the people would see through that and say, I don't want to have, if Prop 218 was to be reversed, I don't want to have a $10,000 assessment to my bill. So again, it's not where I would go to on this issue, but again, that's how people are thinking. People are thinking about their fire insurance. They're not thinking about jihad. Even if it's 200, 300, we all can afford it. We all have $1 million homes, but the answer is people are not thinking that way. I think people believe that in self-insurance, and even though people who are in the high-risk areas, when I talk to them, many of them don't support the jihad, and they don't come to the meetings. That's the fact. There's only been 2 people that have come and spoke on this issue. Of the 1,400 homes, only 2 people have stand up to talk about this. It's very simple. People are not interested. They're not interested in this issue, and so I think, Jeff, your point is correct. This is about a legal issue here. It's not about doing what's right, unfortunately. It's a legal issue, and I would encourage you to just know that we tried this before. I'll just tell you the council member who was out there, Pete Lawrence, is the one that brought those fees down. He advocated for the fees down. I'm not saying it was right or wrong.
That was 3 minutes, excuse me.
I'll let you go here. But again, it's a difficult issue to weigh what you want to do. Thanks.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comment on this item? Seeing none, I will close public comment. Any further discussion from council? I think what we discussed immediately prior, I think is consistent with the feedback that I would recommend. And if anyone has anything they'd like to add, if not, then please proceed.
Okay, understood. Well, we plan on coming back maybe in January and February with plan and control, the sort of the actual document and outline what's already sort of listed in the matrix today. So thank you.
I would just say, please take care around the additional language necessary to limit. I don't know how to operationalize that, but hopefully if you are able to look into it and provide some feedback in that area, that would be really helpful.
Okay, understood.
Thank you. All right, and with that concludes item 5B. For those who just joined us, we are still in the GAD meeting, so the city council meeting will start at 7. So that next is item 6. This is board items limited to requests for future meetings. Does anyone have any requests for future meetings? Seeing none, I will adjourn the GAD board meeting at 6:49, and we will recess until 7 p.m. where the regular city council meeting will take place. So thank you.
Good evening and welcome to the December 19th meeting of the Clayton City Council. It's now 7 o'clock. Meeting's called to order. And first off, take the roll call, please.
Councilmember Cloven is absent. Councilmember Tillman.
Here.
Councilmember Juan.
Here.
Vice Mayor Tripiano.
Here.
And Mayor Diaz.
Yes. Okay, and now if you all join me for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, welcome all, and let me just give you a little administrative thing that I'm going to do. Item number 5A, which is awards and present recognitions for the school children this evening. I'm going to move that up now ahead of the public comment so we don't keep you here until all hours of the night, and that way everybody will get their recognition and anything else. And I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Holly Tillman, who will be presiding on this portion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Welcome, everyone. It's nice to see the chambers full of smiling faces, especially to get these certificates. So tonight we are going to honor several students from Mount Diablo Elementary School and Diablo View Middle School, and they will be receiving the certificates from their principals for respect for the month of November. So if I may, please have Principal Sarah Harris come forward, and if you have any teachers that are with you, you can bring them up as well. Do we have microphones?
Yes, we need a handheld.
And
That way we'll be able to hear you.
Check one. Check 1, 2. Hello?
And for, hello? Can you guys?
Yes.
Okay, it doesn't sound like it's coming out of here. Okay, for anyone who's new to the chambers tonight or this ceremony that we're doing, what we do is about every month or so, we try to honor our students at our local elementary and middle schools who are doing the right characteristic traits that we have for our city. So the Do the Right Thing program is something that was started in 2012, I believe, 2010, by Mayor Hank Stratford. And it's been a tradition that we do this, except during the COVID months. And it's something that we continued in chambers a couple of months ago, and we're honored to have you all here tonight. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Principal Harris. There you go. And I will give that one to you, too. You're welcome.
Okay, so this month we're honoring Reese O'Connor in first grade for the life skill of respect. Reese shows up every morning ready to learn. Reese shows up every morning ready to learn. She is a positive influence on the other students in our class because they look to her as a leader, and she's always doing the right thing on the yard and in line and in all the things we do in class. And she just exemplifies the life skill of respect. So that's why she's being honored tonight.
Reese, come up. Come up. Okay, so next up is Lucas Porter. Come on up here, Lucas. So this message is from Mrs. Grispo, okay? Lucas really sums up all the qualities of Do the Right Thing program. However, the one that stands out the most is respect. Lucas is respectful to his peers and adults, as well as to his teammates and coaches. He is kind, helps others, listens to others, and is very dependable. During class, I know I can count on Lucas to be listening and following directions at all times. He is able to problem solve with his peers and help resolve conflicts on the playground. You will never hear another student say that Lucas was being unkind. Lucas sets an example to others on how to be respectful, and our school is a better place because of him. I have a lot, sorry. All right. Thank you. Okay, the next one is Trevor. I don't know if I saw Trevor here. Okay, well, Trevor is in kindergarten. It has been wonderful getting the opportunity to welcome Trevor to school this year. Trevor is a hardworking student who shows respect for himself and others in everything he does. He actively participates in class discussions, always raises a quiet hand before speaking, which is sometimes hard in kindergarten. He listens when others are talking and gives kind words of encouragement. Trevor is sure to respect others' personal space and feelings and is ready to help out for the good of the group. Trevor is an amazing role model of respect at our school. Yay, Trevor. Alex, Ryan, I didn't see Alex. It's bedtime for a lot of them. Okay, so Alex is one of our second graders. His teacher wrote, Alex is a role model for all the pillars of character. Respect is one of his strongest traits. He is kind and thoughtful with adults and peers. He listens attentively to everyone and responds respectfully. However, he truly shows respect on the playground. He has great sportsmanship. He plays well with all, is always willing to include everyone in a game, and is patient. To top it off, he does it all with a smile. So that's for Alex. All right. And lastly, we have Sophie. Okay, that's okay. So Sophie's teacher nominated her because Sophie always speaks kindly and uses appropriate language in school. For a fifth grader, winning. She is someone that makes sure not to offend others and has nice qualities that are portrayed in her speech to others. Sophie is a model student when it comes to behaviors and is someone that can be counted on to show respect to students and adults alike. So that is for Sophie.
And if we can have Reese and Lucas, please come back up here just to get a photo with your principal and hold your certificate. We're going to do something a little different. And the teacher, too. All right. Here we go. And then Principal Vicki Wilson.
Good evening, everybody. I am very fortunate to recognize 3 of our Diablo View students. First, I have Olivia Barnett. Come on up, Olivia. Olivia is being honored by Mr. Ross. He nominated her, and he says, Olivia exhibits the character trait of respect to both adults and students on campus. When asking for help, she always shows appreciation and listens to suggestions. She treats teachers kindly and uses good manners. Olivia has a great work ethic, is very organized, and takes responsibility for her education. Congratulations. Good. Welcome. Yeah, come on. Come on. If your parents want to get, you guys want to get a picture? Next, we have Trinity Champathon. Come on up. Trinity was recognized by Miss Slade, and she says, Trinity is a very kind and thoughtful student who shows respect to all. She considers others' feelings and opinions before making decisions. She is very polite to me and wants to help wherever she can. She follows directions the first time, which for middle school, and is always sure to ask if she is missing something. She helps others in class when asked, and she waits her turn to speak and is very patient when others need assistance first. Congratulations. And last but absolutely not least is Colt Krupa. Colt was recognized by Miss Ridenauer, and she says, Colt deserves this recognition for showing respect for the following reasons. He makes a point of making eye contact and saying hello to his teachers. He says thank you at the end of each period. He respects himself by getting all of his assignments done on time to the best of his ability. He takes care of classroom supplies and leaves his area neat and tidy at the end of each class, which I'm sure your mom would like that at home. He respectfully engages in class discussions and helps his classmates when they need it. I feel so fortunate to have Colt as my student, and I'm so glad that he gets to be recognized as the great person that he is. Congratulations. Oh, sorry, Colt.
Thank you very much for everybody coming out tonight. You are welcome to stay for our lovely meetings that we have. They're super long, but stay if you want to learn about government. Otherwise, if you guys would like to leave, you can. We will be having an intermission in a little bit for a reception, so you can feel free to leave then too if you'd like. It's up to you. Merry Christmas. Okay. Happy New Year.
They didn't want our refreshments?
Not even the cookies, huh?
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Tillman, and the recognition for the elementary and the middle schools for this evening. At this time, that concludes item 5A, and we will now move back onto the agenda schedule. Item 3, which is public comment for non-agenda items. And there'll be a 3-minute time limit, and you'll be able to see it on your screen. Have we got anybody standing by for that?
We have no comment cards, and currently no one has a raised hand on Zoom.
Okay, and no cards as well, right?
Correct.
Okay, then we will close the public comment of non-agenda items, and we'll move on to the consent calendar, which has basically only one item in it, and that's the approve the minutes of the last meeting. Anything? No, nobody wants to pull the minutes? Okay, then we will move on and go to public comment on the action item or the consent calendar. Anybody wishing to speak on the consent calendar?
No speaker cards and no one on Zoom.
Thank you very much, and we will close the public comment on that, and we'll entertain a motion to approve.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay. Moved and second. Please page and call the roll.
Councilmember Cloven is absent. Councilmember Tillman.
Aye.
Councilmember Juan.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Tripiano.
Aye.
And Mayor Diaz.
And I'm, yes, I as well. Thank you. And now we're going to do a little ceremony. We didn't have everything planned for the last transitional meeting when we reorganized the city council. And at this time, I'm going to make a presentation to the outgoing mayor from the last term, Jeff Wan, after which he'll have a few words to say. And then we have some great refreshments over there. So at this time, let me do this. It's a custom in this community to present the mayor on their last go-round. with a memento for the time that they were the mayor, and I'm going to present that now to Jeff. All right. Appreciate it. Thank you. Have you got any words you'd like to say?
You kind of surprised me a little bit, so I didn't really have anything prepared like I usually do. But thank you very much for the support. I think it's been a great experience over the past year serving as mayor, and I appreciate the opportunity to do that. I think, we have addressed a lot of things over the last year that really needed to be addressed, and so we did take on some things that were very challenging, but we can do hard things, and so I'm glad to say that there was quite a few accomplishments during the year. And that being said, I think the number of things that are left remaining are still quite large, and we will continue to pursue those as a council, and I look forward to the opportunity, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff, for your term as mayor of the city of Clayton.
Point of order,
Okay.
I just have a quick question. Since we
Go ahead.
had an ordinance that abolished gifts for mayors, do we need to change the ordinance? Because that was abolished on August 3rd of 2021. It's a question. Are we changing our ordinance that we had that says that council members no longer receive gifts? Because we have an ordinance that was dated August 3rd of 2021 that abolished it. This was after the 2020 rotation, where we all had a conversation about no more gifts using taxpayer funds. So I'm just trying to understand if we're going to change the ordinance now.
Back to 2021?
No, the new ordinance now says that no council members receive gifts. That is what the current ordinance is.
Well, okay, what the protocol had been over time, at least for the past 20-plus years, is to always allow the outgoing mayor to make some comments on his or her term, and then to be recognized and be given a plaque. In this case, we have a plaque with a gavel on it to commemorate their service, and then we have a little refreshments. So if there's anything else.
No, I'm just, I understand. I know that that's what we had talked about in 2020. And then in August of 2021, it was brought up that we should not be using taxpayer funds to give us gifts. And then I think I actually might have made the motion, or Peter did, and I seconded it. But it was after conversation where then outgoing Vice Mayor Juan said that we shouldn't be using taxpayer funds. And I'm asking, should we change the ordinance? Because right now, unless this is given by public funds, like the community members did it privately.
Let me just say
that's what
this.
I'm asking.
What we, in my mind, what we eliminated was the rocking chair that cost over $400, or the lamp that was over $120. That's what we eliminated.
That's what we eliminated in December 2020, and by the
Right.
time we came back in August, it was no gifts for any council members.
But in this case, I am paying for it.
Okay, so you'll reimburse the city then for this gift?
Once the original comes in.
Okay,
All
thank
right?
you.
Anything else? Okay, we're now going to take about a 10, 15-minute recess, mingle with the former mayor, and we have a lovely table set up by our staff, and I want to thank Amy for taking the lead on that. There's some cookies, some soft drinks, and some water over there. Please join in, and let's have a quick reception. Thank you.
Okay. It's really pretty.
Well, there's plenty, so
That's the curl pattern my daughter wants in her regular hair, and she gets so mad. She's like, there are certain strands where it's straight, certain strands where it's curly, and then she even asked the beautician, can you just put in, can you do a curly weave for me?
2-minute warning, 2-minute warning. 2-minute warning, 2-minute warning. Ready.
Ew, there's ants in here. What the hell?
We got ants.
There's ants. There's ants.
I'd like to get ready.
Crawling on my bag.
Okay. We're going to call the meeting back to order at 7:30 p.m. Thank you all for sharing there. Back to the agenda. And up next is item 7A, which is a report from the city manager and staff.
Good evening, Mayor Diaz and council members. Tonight I have two quick updates. The first one I think a lot of people are going to be excited about. We are overhauling the website. Yeah, make it way more functional, easier for information to be accessed. We did assemble a team of 5 staff members who are diligently working on it. It is going to take a couple of months, and then we'll have our site launched. But we're pretty excited about that because we've gotten a lot of not so great feedback about our website. The second update I have is back to, I'm bringing up SB 1383 again. That's about the composting or organics program is how it's sometimes called. We have now been hearing from some residents who are either low income and or senior citizens who are asking if there's a discount. And so I've done a little preliminary research to find out what other municipalities are doing. At this point, we're not ready to bring something to council for it to be considered. Time-wise, we're looking at approximately March to come back to council. That way, we also understand what kind of budget impact it may have if we were to offer discounts to senior citizens, disabled persons, low income, that sort of thing. So we still have some research to do. What I have been telling people in the meantime, if this issue comes up, and I encourage you to get the word out as well, is to have people email the city clerk inbox. So that's cityclerk@claytonca.gov. It's also on the website. The email address is also on the website. At this time, I don't want to put a web form on the website to try to capture data because we're also in the middle of overhauling the website. So just to be clear, as soon as, depending on the timing, as soon as we do have the website up, I think that would be a great way to finish collecting that data and revisit the issue in March. And that's all I have.
May I just ask a quick question
Absolutely.
regarding that? So if we were to offer a senior discount, would the city be covering that cost of the discount, or does Republic Services offer that?
Republic would not cover the discounted portion. There are two different lanes that we could consider. One is the Prop 218, because it is ratepayer based. That would mean that we would need to make sure that the rest of the ratepayers are amenable to offsetting that cost. That's not a highly desirable consideration. If talking to other municipalities, it's a very nominal amount typically. So it's more common for municipalities to offset that amount. Typically, the discount is about 30%. Again, it's a very narrow portion of the population as well. But I didn't want to bring that to council without really wrapping my head around what kind of cost we're looking at for that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for your report. Anybody else have any questions for Amy? Okay, that completes item 7A. We now move into the public hearing portion, which is item 8A, and that is to introduce and waive the first reading of the ordinance amending Clayton Municipal Code Title 17 to implement adopted general plan housing element policy, rezone the properties in conformance with the housing and land use elements, clarify administrative procedures, and align with state law, CEQA status that is, and so forth. And the Community Director, Dana Ayers.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I don't have a deck for you this evening, but I will just do a brief overview of the amendments that are amendments to the zoning code that are proposed for your consideration tonight. As was introduced, these are zoning code amendments that are implementing housing element policies that were adopted by the City Council in January of this year. The City Council made certain commitments through programs and policies in the housing element to diversify the housing stock, streamline certain processes to help facilitate construction of housing in the city, and to give greater flexibility in development regulations for multifamily residential zoning districts. The amendments that are proposed for your consideration tonight also include zoning map amendments to redesignate certain properties from, a variety of zoning districts to various residential land use districts in accordance with the land use amendments that the council also adopted in January. In addition to the zoning code amendments to implement housing element policy, we're also taking this opportunity to make a few changes to other sections of the code pertaining to daycare homes and density bonus law to basically align with state law. The ordinances that are codified in the municipal code right now conflict with state law. It does create confusion for the public, so we do suggest or recommend amending those sections of the code to either delete them entirely because they're not applicable, as in the case of daycare homes, or to revise them to refer to state law so that we don't have to keep amending them every time state law changes. And then there's also a few other changes that we're recommending, cleanup items, as well as establishing some appeal processes where they don't exist right now. And this is one of what will likely be several phases of zoning code amendments to implement housing element policy. The last one that you considered was the accessory dwelling unit ordinance back in April. That was a housing element policy, but also a goal of the council from 2021. This is a second phase. There will be future phases as more policies continue to be implemented. There are other state statutes that will trigger changes to the local zoning code as well. Those will be future zoning code amendments for this council's consideration. The Planning Commission did, in accordance with your code, consider these amendments at public hearings on November 14th and November 28th, and did adopt a resolution making findings and recommending that the council make findings to adopt and implement these changes. With that, the amendments that are proposed are Exhibit A to your ordinance. The zoning map amendments are Exhibit B to your draft ordinance. The Planning Commission's resolution is also attached to your staff report. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them at this time.
Great, thank you, Dana. Any questions of staff? Go ahead.
I thank you, Director Ayers. I've got a couple of quick questions. One is, I've got a series of questions. One is on the parking, and if you can just explain to me, I live in Chaparral Springs, which are the townhouses right here, and we have limited guest parking. There's no parking in the driveways. There's no we're in shared driveways. We have garages. So how would this affect a development like mine? It seems like we're eliminating some of the guest parking. And can you just describe what the changes are regarding parking?
Sure. So some of these questions also came up at the Planning Commission level, as I'm sure you're aware. I'm sure you saw the videos that are attached to the staff report or linked in the staff report. So there are a couple changes that are proposed, and all of them are directly triggered by changes in policy that the council adopted earlier this year. The first was to eliminate the half space requirement of guest parking for multifamily developments, half space per unit. And then the other changes would eliminate the requirement for covered parking for multifamily development. And then another layer of change to the parking regulations would reduce the requirement for off-street parking for single-family homes from 4 spaces per unit to 2 spaces per unit. Now, each of those is pretty much directly tied to a program in the housing element. Eliminating a requirement for guest parking and covered parking reduces costs, which can be considered a constraint, particularly for multifamily housing. There are other benefits as well, including, as I mentioned as you saw in the hearing, less pervious surface, which is better for water quality, less asphalt surface, which is better for urban heat management. The parking regulations that are proposed, in my experience working in other jurisdictions, are actually more in line with what is typically seen for parking for single-family and multifamily developments. As was also mentioned at the Planning Commission meeting, these are minimum requirements. The developers of these projects could opt to offer more parking than is required if they felt that it made their project more marketable.
Oh, right, but I would just say that's probably not likely to happen, that they would add more parking rather than put units in.
Well, I would, yes and no. I mean, you look at single-family developments in other cities. In Pittsburgh, where I used to work, the requirement is 2 spaces per unit. What you typically see is a 2-car garage with 2 spaces and a driveway in front. You also sometimes see 3-car garages, which results in 5 to 6 spaces. So you may actually see developers offer more parking than is required, again, because they're looking to maximize their the marketability of their projects, and if that helps, then they'll offer more.
So in a development like mine, again, Chaparral Springs, being, it's 4 units, would there be no guest parking then? Are we eliminating the guest parking?
Well, Chaparral Springs is a single-family attached unit, right? It's not what we would consider multifamily.
Okay.
Give me just a moment because I don't want to go off of memory. I get in trouble when I do that.
And the other thing is that this is not state mandated. This is something that we are just recommending.
This implements policy that this council adopted in January.
Okay.
So the amendment comes almost directly from language in the housing element program. And the justification is for each of these proposed amendments is outlined in the attachment to the Planning Commission resolution, where there's the 2 columns. One column identifies the recommended change, and then the other provides the text of the program or policy that is the basis for that revision.
Okay. And you're looking up single-family attached right now, just to see what the parking requirement is?
Right. So a single-family dwelling, it would, again, be 2 spaces per unit, at least 1 covered, and additional parking would be required for any unit with more than 5 bedrooms, or more than 4 bedrooms, so 5 or more.
Okay. And we're maximum at 3 in our development. So, so again, that would be 1 covered,
1 uncovered.
1 uncovered.
They can be tandem. And again, experience,
Okay.
in my observation and working in other jurisdictions, a 2-car garage is pretty common. A developer in this scenario could also opt for a 1-car garage with a tandem, with a driveway. When I have seen those kinds of developments, they do still have banks of shared parking spaces that are available to any, to any occupant or visitor. It's up to typically that's a homeowners association that would enforce that. One development that I know of that's outside of this city where it has offered 1 covered and 1 uncovered space. I can't say for sure that the requirement was for that or for if there was a requirement of guest parking, but I can tell you that they did provide guest parking.
Okay. Because I know our guest parking is often at a premium, even though we've got our 2 spots in the garage, but like.
Can I ask something related to this? Because I had questions on this item too. I just want to make sure I'm following the thread correctly, because you're talking differently between single family and multifamily, and I think the prior requirement, or sorry, the current requirement is for multifamily guest parking, right? For multifamily developments to have a half a space per unit as guest parking.
For guest parking, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so the guest parking requirement applies to multifamily. Single-family development does not have a guest parking requirement.
Okay, so when we're talking about guest parking requirements, it's only applicable to multifamily.
Correct.
Right. Okay, cool. Just making sure I understood that. Because then when you were talking earlier about implementing the goals that we adopted, but when I look at the original document plus changes, it looks like the parking was I can't tell the timing of the ad. So when I look at the housing element document that was linked in the agenda, that document is like the 260-page document, the big long one. The discussion around guest parking, it's like, I think track changes are on, so that's an addition. Like, was that, the goal that we had here was, I'm trying to get the language right. It says essentially excessive parking requirements reduce buildable area, increase in construction costs, like what you said. There are 3 elements that you had mentioned earlier about parking. One was the covered parking, the guest parking, and then the 4 units down to 2, or 4 spaces down to 2. It seems like we're trying to achieve a goal of reducing costs and all the consistent goals within the housing element. But are we deciding that eliminating the guest parking is one way that we want to do that? Is that like a discretionary decision?
Well, I think it's a discretionary decision that you've already made, because the program that's the basis for this is in the adopted housing element. So the language in program D2 very explicitly indicates the policy direction that you've already set, which is to reduce the parking requirement for single family, to eliminate the guest and covered parking requirements for multifamily.
Okay, so that was part of, because when I look at the track changes, it seems like it's adding the parking, and I can't tell the timing of when that was added.
So there's confusion because of the drafting, the versioning.
Yeah, so that's the part I'm not following.
Okay, yeah, so what's, the document that's linked in your staff report is the housing element that's adopted, including track changes. Those track changes were retained in the version that you looked at in January so that HCD reviewers could see how it changed from the July 2022 draft submittal in response to their comments. So we were trying to, retaining the track changes, while it's confusing, I get that. It was intended to make sure that to direct our reviewers to, this is what changed since the last time you saw it, whatever, 8 months earlier.
Okay.
But the track changes is what is adopted in the housing element.
Okay, yeah, that part was the part that was difficult to follow.
Yeah, and it's all, the program is referenced in the attachment to the Planning Commission staff report as well.
Okay, thank you.
I know, but there were a lot of attachments, so it was a lot of reading, and I didn't realize that about the track changes either. I thought those were made since we adopted the housing element in January. My other question is on height requirements. Were we always at the multi-family residential, were we always at 40 feet? That seems
Yes.
higher. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. I just don't remember it being that high. And my very last question for now is, can you give us an update on ADU units? How many do we have in the city, and how many are in process? Do we know?
Sure. Well, backing up just a little bit to your question about the 40-foot, in multifamily high density, it's always been 40 feet. That's not
It's been
changing.
40, okay.
So that's not one of the track changes that's identified as a proposed revision. ADU construction, I don't have the numbers memorized for this year. For the past few years, 3 years or so that I've been preparing the annual reports, we've gotten anywhere between 3 and 5 ADUs permitted per year. This year, we had a few very recent applications. I think we have 2 built this year, and I think we have another 2 in the pipeline. But I can't say that for certainty that those are the numbers. I'd need to go back and look at our our listing,
Okay.
our permit submittals to give you the actual number. But
Okay.
it's somewhere in
2
the
to 3?
Yeah, the last few years it's been the generally 3 to 5
3 to 5.
range
Okay.
per year.
And that's about what we were predicting or estimating?
Yeah, well, so in our first housing element submission, we actually projected, I think, 5 per year. Our reviewers, when we submitted that to them in July of 2022, they thought that was too high, so we lowered it to 3 per year.
Right, that's right. Okay. Okay, that's it for now. Thank you.
I don't have any questions. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm now going
I
to
have
open
a
up
few-
the.
I have a few.
Oh, you have enough? Go ahead.
I just have a few. You mentioned earlier about phases of zoning changes. The first was ADU, this is the second. Do we have like a roadmap of other phases, or is that just kind of like an unknown at this point?
It's a little bit of an unknown at this time. I know that there will be future phases because I know that there are programs that I did not capture this time around. Really the emphasis for this phase is the zoning map and development regulation changes that need to happen to accommodate the RENA. There's a statutory deadline of January 31st of next year, 2024, for us to do those. So there is some urgency in at least getting the map changes and the development regulations modified. The future phases are there's less statutory obligation for them. So we need to get them done, certainly, as soon as possible. But there's not so much of a hard deadline for when they need to be done. So I was really, if I could have done all of them in the next 2 to 3 years, great. But one set had to be done in the next month and a half. So I prioritized those. Others will be done in the future. Our HCD reviewers who are currently looking at our draft housing element, or excuse me, our adopted housing element with draft revisions, have identified some other state statute amendments to the code, that state statute triggered amendments to the code that we'll need to make. So I know there will be future phases, but I was really just trying to prioritize these ones that had to be done.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense. I just want to get the landscape right, because I know that there's been a lot of effort around getting this in under the clock, and the clock is quickly approaching. So,
Yeah.
I wanted to recognize that a lot of the changes here are a result of those requirements that we are trying to meet. So,
Yes.
the documents are quite large, and for, I think, well, I will say members of the public, but also myself, when I'm reading it, because of the volume, tracking between what's changed and what hasn't. So we did our original submission for the adopted element in January-ish.
July of 2022 was
Okay.
the first time we
First
submitted
time.
a pre-adoption draft to them.
Okay, and then again in January of this year.
Correct, the
And then-
adopted element.
And then we got comments back from HCD in the May timeframe?
March.
March, okay.
And we were working on them May, June. We attempted to resubmit in July. And there's a story there.
Yeah, that's fine.
And resubmitted formally in October.
Okay, excellent. So is there like a summary of what's changed from the October submission between the January document and what we submitted again in October? Because I think that would help understand at least, or help clarify if there was any significant changes from that point to this point. Like with the track changes, I think I mistakenly thought that there was other modifications, but if that's not the case, then maybe the inventory of changes from then till now is actually smaller than I was thinking. Do we have that?
So at this point, what we have, you have your adopted housing element from January, which has the track changes in it. I already explained that.
Yes.
Why we did that for HCD. The October version, which is posted on the housing element website, includes changes that are not adopted yet. They're not formal yet. HCD has not said they're okay, but they are written responsive to HCD's comments from March. We posted another version last Wednesday, again responsive to HCD comments. The versions in October and dated this month, both of which are on the housing element webpage, the changes that are proposed to the adopted element are highlighted in different color text. So they're either highlighted in gray or they're highlighted in green. The programs and policies that are listed in the table in your staff report, these are the adopted versions, not including anything subsequent to January. Does that make sense?
Yes. It's also like an exercise in tracking, I think.
It is.
A little bit. Okay.
And it starts to get awkward after so many revisions. I understand that.
Yeah, a change log would be great, just saying. But I know that the volume is high. So, okay. So then.
So I will say, to simplify it, you have the adopted housing element from January. In the current version dated December that was released for public review last week, changes from the January version are highlighted in color. That's the simplest way for me to identify changes that have occurred that are drafted since January. They're either highlighted gray or highlighted green.
Okay.
And what are the blue highlights? I think I saw blue also.
Also changes since January.
Also, okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah, so there's another HCD versioning thing there.
And that's for the public, that's attachment 4 then in the packet? Because attachment 3 is the January version.
No. So attachment 3 is the January version. Attachment 4 is your EIR
Okay.
for the
So
housing
where
element.
is the?
I didn't attach.
Oh, it's not here?
No,
Okay.
it's not, because those are not
Not-
accepted. Yeah, those have not been formally incorporated into the housing element. They're still under review by our HCD reviewers. So again, the basis for the revisions to the zoning code in tonight's public hearing is the January 2023 adopted element, which is linked as attachment 3. And attachment 4
So
is
it's
the
making
environmental
the-
impact report.
Okay, so it's making the changes to the zoning maps that are related to the January
2023.
2023 adopted element.
Right.
Okay, that is more clear. Sorry.
Now, it is what it is.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
All right. Then I think I'm good.
Anything else? Okay, this is a public hearing item, and I'm going to now open it up for public comment. And do we have any cards or people online? We have neither. Thank you, that's good. Closing public comment. All right, now we're bringing it back up here, because what we have to do is actually initiate and accept the written report, and then introduce and waive further reading on this item and so forth.
Can I ask one more question?
Absolutely.
I thought of it. On page 65 of the agenda, the PDF agenda, I guess is what I'm referring to.
I don't have the digital version. Can you give me the attachment
the
number and
map.
page? The map. Okay, thank you.
Exhibit B.
The map.
So when I look at Exhibit B, I'm just curious because Site M is here as well as Site L, but they are not reflected in the table below it. Is that, am I misreading it?
No, you're not misreading. They are not proposed to be changed as far as zoning. So whatever the zoning is in place right now is the zoning that will stay. So Site L was rezoned by this council in the summer of 2021 for the Oak Creek Canyon development.
Yeah.
So the zoning that's there is what's proposed to stay. And Site M has, I forget what the precise designation is in the Marsh Creek Road specific plan, but it's not proposed to change.
Okay, that was it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, bringing it back to the council for action on what's been requested by STEP, which is again to introduce and waive further reading of the ordinance, amending various chapters of the Clayton Municipal Code, and so forth and so on, and receive certain administrative procedures on align with the provisions of the certain California statutes governing land use, and number 4, rezone 8 sites to accommodate residential uses. I'll entertain a motion.
And I'll second it.
Well, I would make the motion as you described.
Oh, I thought that was the motion. Oh.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
sorry.
will
Go
make
ahead.
the motion as described. I will not read
Okay,
the
you're
entire
making
thing
the motion,
again.
you're going to second it?
I'll second it.
Okay. It's been moved by Councilmember Juan and seconded by Vice Mayor Trupiano. Please take the roll.
Councilmember Cloven is absent. Councilmember Tillman.
Aye.
Councilmember Juan.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Trupiano.
Aye.
And Mayor Diaz.
Yes. Okay. We'll now move into the action items portion of the agenda. There are 4 items there. We're going to begin with item number 9A, which is to approve audited annual comprehensive financial report of the City of Clayton for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2023. Finance, please.
Good evening, Mayor Diaz and Council Member. In front of you today is the annual comprehensive financial reporting for fiscal year 2022-2023. Before I invite Bryce Rojas, our auditor for the city, I would like to give you some brief overview of the governmental fund and government-wide net position. So our general fund basically consists of 3 funds, general fund, rainy day fund, and pandemic recovery reserve fund. The total revenue for the general fund for the fiscal year was $5.4 million, and the total expenditure was $5.6 million. Since the revenue was less than expenditures, we had a deficit balance of approximately $184,000 for the general fund. But if we include the revenue received from state and local fiscal recovery fund, ARPA fund, our second tranche, the general fund reported an increase of $1.3 million, which ended the fund balance for the year at $7.7 million, and out of $7.76 million is unassigned and available for appropriation. Compared to last fiscal year, meaning prior fiscal year 21-22, the revenue increased by $520,000, primarily due to property taxes and other revenue sources for the year. The expenditure decreased by $652,000 compared to fiscal year 21-22, and that was due to the expenditure reduction in general government. Next, I would like to highlight is landscape maintenance district. The total revenue for fiscal year 22-23 for LMD was $1.3 million, and total expenditure was $1.4, which decreased the fund balance by $118,000. The total fund balance for the year ended June 30, 2023 is approximately $478,000. Compared to last year, the revenue did increase by $72,000 for fiscal year 22-23, and the revenue increased by $72,000 and the expenditure decreased by $215,000. We have about 10 funds in our non-major governmental fund. The total revenue compared to last year increased by $58,000, and then the total revenue for the year was $1.8 million. The expenditure increased by $276,000 compared to last fiscal year, and then the expenditure balance for the year was $1.1 million, which brought the fund balance for the non-major governmental fund to about $2 million. As a whole, for governmental-wide, for the total net position increased by $758,000. The governmental activities increased by $789,000, but for the business activities for the city, for Endeavor Hall, the net position actually decreased by $30,000, which resulted the government-wide net position to be $46.5 million. With this, let me invite our auditor, Bryce Rojas, to give you a more detailed presentation over in Zoom since he's not feeling well. So can we invite Bryce, please? Thank you.
Hello. Thank you for accommodating me and letting me join you via Zoom this evening. Let me share my screen real quick. Okay. Let's see here. So we perform an annual audit is required to be performed every year. That's what annual means. To comply with legal and regulatory requirements. We're from Cropper Accountancy Corporation, and our office is in Walnut Creek, so we're local. And this year, I'm going to preface everything with we have not issued final financial statements, a final issued annual comprehensive financial report in ACFR, but I'm going to speak as if we have, because I don't anticipate any changes. We're just waiting on a couple numbers for the supplementary information, or the statistical section, I think it is. So this year we are able to issue an unmodified or a clean opinion on the financials, on the numbers. And as Prapti's kind of already gone through, I will summarize a lot of the information. The city's increased its net position as a whole up to $46.5 million at June 30th, 2023. And the unrestricted portion is just under $6 million. And the general fund revenues were about $5.4 million, with expenditures at $5.6 million, resulting in a deficiency of $183,000 of revenues over expenditures, actually revenues under expenditures. And then the general fund received also the $1.46 million transfer related to the American Rescue Plan Act fund. And this resulted in a general fund increase of $1.3 million over the prior year. So ultimately, the city increased its net position by $760,000 from the prior year. And as part of our audit, and we focus mostly on the numbers. That's our goal, is to make sure the numbers are materially presented correctly, fairly presented. But as a part of it, we do look at internal controls. We try to get an understanding of internal controls. And in doing so, we often know areas where the city is deficient or where they can improve. And so this year we noted 2 material weaknesses, and these are similar to years past because the continuity of personnel is the first area of material weakness that we've noted. The city's gone through changes in the accounting department over the past few years, and it's led to a loss of, what's the word I'm looking for? Sorry. Institutional knowledge. That's an easy word. There's an institutional knowledge that has been lost over time, and it makes it difficult for people coming in to properly perform their duties. They're learning on the fly, and as a result, it took more time, or there were some errors in closing accounts, and so we had to book some journal entries for that. And so we are recommending that the city develop a succession plan, and this will help the city personnel know their responsibilities, know how to close the books at the end of each reporting period, and also outline procedures to implement as a redistribution of responsibilities as needed. And then also we noted that in the agency funds, there was a fund that had a negative cash balance. And this was as a result of a loss of institutional knowledge. The accounting personnel did not have the correct understanding or complete understanding of the purposes of the agency funds and how to properly account for them. So we're recommending that a memo be created for each of the agency funds on how to account for them, where the money's coming from, where it's supposed to go, and when all the transactions are supposed to occur. We didn't know any other opportunities for the city to strengthen their internal controls over financial reporting. And I'm going to quickly go through some of the numbers, but if you have questions, please let me know. I'd be happy to answer or do the best I can. So the net position for the city, or the equity, was about $46.5 million. Out of that, if all the capital assets, if you take the capital assets and then take any debt that was incurred to purchase those capital assets, 30 million of that of the equity is that net investment in capital assets. So it's non-spendable. It's in capital asset form. And then out of that 46.5 million, 10.3 of it is restricted for special projects and programs. And then after that, 5.944 million is unrestricted. So if you receive all the money coming into you, pay all the liabilities out, and you'll be left with $5.9 million. And this is a $758,000 increase from the prior year. And for the general fund, the equity portion of the fund balance was 7.7 million, and 191,000 of that was in non-spendable form. 1.5 million of it is committed for special purposes, and then that leaves the general fund with a 5.9 million unassigned balance, and that is an increase of 1.3 million from the prior year. And just looking at the revenues on a year-to-year basis, the charges for service went down $138,000 to $863,000. Operating grants was about the same year to year, $57,000 increase up to 2.8 million. Capital grants and contributions was also about the same, but decreased down to 115,000. Endeavor Hall's charges for service increased 17,000 to 35,000. Property taxes increased to almost 300,000 to 3.1 million. Special parcel taxes increased also to about 1.4 million. And then other taxes increased up to 747,000. The other revenues increased 370,000 up to 914,000, all for total revenues of $10 million. That's a $660,000 increase over last year. And the operating grants includes ARPA funds of 1.4 million and other grants of 1.3 million. And then looking at that in a pie chart form, 31% of the money, the revenues coming in is for property taxes. And then the next largest is the operating grants and contributions of 2.8 million at 28%. For the expenses side, the general government expenses went down 600,000 to $2 million. Public safety increased 250,000 to almost 3 million. And public works increased almost 400,000 to 2.9 million. And then community and economic development was relatively the same, but decreased down to 340,000. Parks and Rec services increased 200,000 to 940,000. And then Endeavor Hall's expenses increased almost 5,000 for up to 65,000 for total government-wide expenses of 9.2 million. And looking at the pie chart, 31% is for public works and 32% is public safety, with the next largest being general government at 22%. And looking at the general fund revenues, the property taxes increased almost 300,000 to 3.1 million. And then sales and use tax decreased to about 540,000. Business license income increased 45,000 to 208. And franchise fees also increased slightly to 619,000. And service charges decreased this year down to 240,000. The revenues are at 666, so that's a $235,000 increase from prior year. And then the transfers in were relatively the same, and that was related to the ARPA funding. And so total revenues for general fund were $7 million. And looking at that, property taxes are the huge portion of general fund revenues, coming at 45%, with the transfers in or the grants at 23%. And then the general fund expenditures, the general government portion decreased 886,000 down to 1.6. The public safety increased up to 2.7. And public works also increased to 370,000. Community and economic development were up to 346,000, and parks and rec services were up to 472,000. And capital outlay was $8,000, all adding up to 5.59 million in expenditures. And so the large portion of that is for public safety at almost 50%, with general government coming in at 30%. And then some additional notes, the pension liability at year end was 6.3 million, with deferred outflows at 3.1 million and deferred inflows at 685,000. The OPEB liability was at 601,000 without any deferred inflows or outflows. And then during last year, leases were capitalized onto the balance sheet. And this year, a new GASB was implemented for subscription-based information technology agreements, or SPIDAs. And they're treated like leases. So I've grouped them together here. So the right to use assets that the city has this year were at $340,000 net of amortization. Well, I might be wrong on that. Accumulated amortization was $114,000, and the payable portion, the payable for the leases and SPIDAs over their life will be $240,000. So that's not all due next year, but it's over the life of these leases and SPIDAs. And so I quickly went through the audit, the audited financial statements. But if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer any.
Thank you, Mr. Rojas. Any questions from the council?
Mayor, may I make one quick comment? First, I just want to say thank you to Bryce. I know that you're still really not feeling well, and we've had a lot of conversations recently about whether or not you were up for this today. So I really just want to thank you for taking time to meet with us over Zoom. And then secondly, I understand that typically this is presented in January with most municipalities. So again, we really appreciate you making an aggressive attempt at meeting our request.
Thank you. And I will note that on, I think, page 9 and 10 of the slides, there were a couple updates in the presentation that was provided to you and the presentation that was given tonight. A couple of typos were corrected. And I will say that I think the city has the right personnel going forward. So hopefully they can keep going forward. Great, doing well.
I have a couple questions, if that's okay. Bryce, thank you again for entertaining us tonight. Around the material weakness, specifically the adjustments for agency funds, in your review of internal controls, is account reconciliation one of the things that that you review as part of your internal control work? Because I would think that a negative cash balance would be something that an account rec would capture.
So the cash funds are pooled, and in this particular agency fund, it's related to other agency funds, and also the bond was paid off, I think, at the beginning of this year, and so there's just an incomplete understanding of how to move around the funds led to this negative cash balance in the agency fund. I don't know if that's answered your question.
I'll add to that. So we have two funds for the agency fund. So one of the funds like negative and the other funds overinflated. It's due to the accounting error in the prior years. So that's what Bryce is saying. In aggregate, once all the accounting entries have been made, we will be over 16,000 approximately. So we're still looking into that. And like Bryce said, we paid off one of the debt back in August of 2022. So we're working with NBS to close that and reconcile all the negative cash balances between two funds. Does that answer your question?
Kind of. I think what I would expect is that at a fund level, when we're looking at cash balances at a fund level, part of the procedures would not only be to reconcile the pooled cash, but also to look at it from a fund perspective for all asset liability accounts to make sure that the balances are going in the right direction.
Right.
So I guess my question is more along the lines of, as part of our transaction cycle, is this a step that's included in our internal controls, and is this something that is reviewed by Cropper when they're performing their procedures? Because I'm guessing the answer is no, but it is something that I think is a worthwhile endeavor.
Right. So I am not aware of any reconciliation done at the city. Like, I am not. Maybe it was done, but I don't have any paperwork to see if it was done before me. But I do agree we need to reconcile it on the fund level to see, whatever we're getting it for the debt service payment, we're paying it out. We're not accounting it to any other funds. We have not done that, but that's something we're working towards.
Okay. I think we went through some of the materials very quickly. So one of the things that was in the staff report was, or I may have read it in a different place, but I think there was a idea to collapse the three components of the general fund for tracking. Was that in the staff report, or was that from a different place?
It is in staff report.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Do we have a sense of what was spent from those other two funds within the general fund throughout FY23?
Bryce, do you have Excel in front of you to tell?
So there is a table in the management's discussion and analysis. I don't know if you're referring to that. It should be on page, I'm trying to get there right now. 28 of the PDF, 25 on the page numbers. No, sorry, not that.
So it's 29 on the ACFR, page 29 on the ACFR.
All right, hold on a second. I got to do some rapid scrolling.
Yes.
Okay. So I guess one, and thank you for pointing that out, because I read it, but I didn't connect the dots.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
Didn't connect the dots on that one. So when you had introduced the topic, so this isn't a question for you, Bryce. This is just a general discussion. When you introduced the topic about the general fund, we see that there's we are representing there's a deficit in the general fund of 183, I think was the number, right?
Exactly, yes.
Okay. So the spend here, the things that we spent from rainy day and pandemic here on page 29 of the ACFR, it looks like it's approximately 198,000, if I'm doing my mental math correctly. So that figure, if I understand it correctly, is that 197 included in the general fund expense that we're deriving the $183,000 deficit from?
It is.
Okay. So it seems like, while it does, in total for the general fund, there was a deficit of 183,000.
That's correct.
But it looks like that number is very close to the amount that we authorized to spend out of the rainy day and pandemic recovery fund for specific actions, knowing that those would be used from, essentially reserves. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it looks like it. Yep. Yeah.
Okay. Because then I think I would just say, it feels like it could be misleading to say that there's a deficit when essentially we specifically authorized reserve spending of these amounts.
Right, but the thing is, the ARPA fund, we don't receive that we don't
For sure.
receive it every year. That's the reason why we said that, because operationally revenue is less than expenditure. And if that was something very common, like every year, we would not have said that. But because we do not receive that, and that's in our reserve, that's the reason why we didn't say that.
Yeah, and I think that's accurate. However, because the reason why we separated it was to essentially segregate it from the general fund. So when you look at general fund spend, it is apples to apples rather than the specific amounts that we pulled from the reserve. So I don't want to belabor the point too much, but it does seem like that piece could be clarified in the report to add a little context on what is actually happening.
So
Does
I
that
think
make
that
sense?
is
Also,
a
when we
good
made those
suggestion, and can be
expenditures-
suggested in it can be noted in the management's discussion analysis at the perfect location to highlight this and identify the reason for that deficit.
Yeah, because in the MD&A on page 29, we are essentially saying that there's this deficit signifying an operational loss for the year. But really, I wouldn't say that that's wrong per se, but I think it is missing some context in the fact that we essentially appropriated money from these funds to spend in a different way. So I don't know if that can be updated within the MD&A.
No, it can be updated, but but the revenue is aggregated too. So
Well, actually, the revenue shows in as a transfer in.
well,
It's below the 183, right?
yes, that's for the general fund, but up on top, like if you go to page 100 for general fund, on the ACFR.
Page 100.
Yeah.
Oh, the ACFR page 100.
Yeah,
Okay,
page ACFR page 100.
More rapid scrolling. Hold on.
Sorry, I know it's a big report.
Yes.
So the revenue is the actuals that listed on the column. It consists of all three funds.
Yes. However, the revenue portion, on the revenue, we were reflecting 5.4 million.
Yes.
Is that
Without-
inclusive?
No.
So that's what I'm saying. The 5.4 is not inclusive of the revenue of those other amounts. It is included in the other section for other financing sources, uses in the transfers in, yes?
I agree.
So essentially,
you want us to
the
reword
benefit.
that?
No, I think the presentation is fine. I think the MD&A
Okay.
that's talking about it should be, it would be helpful to add context around the source of funds, because it makes it appear that the deficit is, it doesn't add the context of where that money is coming from.
Okay. We can add that.
Well, and also those expenditures, we knew were coming from the ARPA fund account, and they were one-time, right, expenditures for maintenance and police department, correct?
Yes.
Those weren't going to be recurring also, just like ARPA's not
Right.
recurring. Okay.
And then I guess maybe
And
this
if I
is a
may
question
add a
for you,
little
Brett.
further context, the rainy day fund and the ARPA funds are part of the committed fund balance. The 1.5 million of committed fund balance for the general fund is the rainy day and the ARPA. And so any additional losses are going to be taken out of there rather than the unassigned. Or maybe not losses, that was the wrong word. Expenditures come out of that fund, or the portion of the fund balance.
Yeah, and on the balance sheet side, for sure. My other question was, I guess, on page 44 of the ACFR, but 150 of the PDF, it looks like this is the government fund statement of revenue expenditure changes in fund balance. For this one, transfers in do not equal transfers out. Can we elaborate on why that would be? I think there are potentially some valid reasons.
Sorry,
I
what
think the
page number was that? I'm
$70,000 is the
sorry.
difference, and that's related to the internal service funds. We can see that further in the notes on page 76 of the ACFR, the capital equipment replacement fund.
76 of the ACFR. Okay, 1 second. Let's see if I can get there. Yeah, because I imagine it has to go out to a different fund, and that's why it's not in balance there, but. Got it. Okay, perfect. Thank you. That's helpful. I gotta say, when you're looking at this large document that is a PDF, it is traditionally designed to be a fold out, so you read left to right, but it's a little bit more difficult that way. Let's see. Okay, I think that's all my questions for now. If you had any others.
All right, thank you. Okay, this is a public or an action item, and I'm going to open up for public comment at this time. Do we have anybody online or with a card on file?
We have neither.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll close the public comment portion and bring it back to the city council for action.
The only other question I had for Bryce is, you said this is not the final, so when do we anticipate having the final version? Bryce or Prof.
Okay, it should be out by end of this month. This month, we had sicknesses, like staff being out, I'm sorry, so which is why we're like all, we were not able to provide Bryce everything he wanted. But this afternoon, I hope I have provided everything. I'll just wait for his response, but by end of this month, we should be good to go.
Okay, thank you.
I agree.
Anything else from the city council? No? Okay, well, the item here is to review and approve the presentation of the annual financial report, including the unmodified opinion of the independent auditors, and that's Cropper Accountancy and so forth, for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2023.
I would move approval as described.
And I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded, moved by Council Member Juan and seconded by Vice Mayor Trupiano. Would you please take the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Cloven is absent. Councilmember Tillman?
Aye.
Councilmember Juan?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Trupiano?
Aye.
And Mayor Diaz.
Yes. Okay. Now we'll move in, that completes item A9A. We'll now move into 9B, which is to authorize $200,000 of the general fund reserves to initiate civil engineering design and environmental permitting consultant services for the Cardinate Trail, Mount Diablo Creek bark repairs, with future reimbursements from the FEMA. And Mr. City Engineer.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. As the mayor just described, we're looking to get a council authorization for an upcoming mid-year budget adjustment for $200,000. The funding for this is necessary to start the design environmental permitting for the repairs on 3 sites along Mount Diablo Creek. It's shown on the second page of the staff report. They're all relatively close in between North Mitchell Canyon and Diablo Creek Place. All 3 sites had damage from the January 2023 storms and are eligible under the FEMA disaster declaration to be reimbursed 75% through the federal FEMA Department, Homeland Security, and then the remaining 25%, which is the sort of local, the Cal OES, the State Office of Emergency Services, can cover 75% of that 25%, which is about 18.75, thus leaving about 6.25% of eligible costs. So right now, our really rough estimate for the repairs along this creek is around $500,000. It could be more or less, but we'd like to get the authorization and concurrence from council that we would start the design work. It's necessary in order to continue to proceed with the FEMA processing. They need to have estimates and a initial design for their mitigation specialist to review. Right now, we're not planning on putting it back exactly how it was, which is just earth bank. We do believe that it would make sense financially long-term that the outside bank where these are occurring, the scour is occurring, needs to have some kind of rock slope protection or gabion basket walls, which is similar to what's already existing at Site 3. But those are typically difficult to get permitted, so we anticipate a kind of a long process through the 3 major regulatory agencies, which is California Department of Fish and Wildlife, Regional Water Quality Control Board, and the U.S. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which all 3 would have jurisdiction in this case, since would need to work at the base of the creek. I would note the other element is at the Site 3, which is where the trail, the fence, and the creek are all very close, has a large oak tree that's roots are exposed. That tree will likely be affected by whatever repair is done because the roots are right in the exposed slope. And so if we are to put a similar gabion basket repair, and just so you understand, like the existing one that's out there, the bottom layer actually goes back probably about 12 to 14 feet. So it's actually underneath the trail, and it's been stacked. And as it gets taller, the sections aren't as wide. So wide, a little less wide, and comes up a little bit like a pyramid. But you see a very vertical face. Something similar would obviously impact the tree roots. There may be other alternatives. We don't know yet, but at this point, we just need to start the design work or really the planning and alternative analysis for this project. The work technically has to be constructed by July of 2024, which is 18 months after the event. That's FEMA's requirement. It's very likely we're going to have to get an extension because of the permit requirements. And so we've already notified FEMA on that issue, that it's most likely the work will be constructed in the window that's allowed between April and October of 2025. It's very unlikely you'll get in before October of 2024, given the likelihood of having to do some alternative analysis with the regulatory agencies, because they will not typically like rock or concrete as part of a solution. So that's the overall report. Happy to answer any maybe specific questions about the location, thoughts. The first 2 sites, I would say, have more space, are easier and so the cost is lower. The third site is very tight, it's very difficult to also access to get even to that point because of the existing pedestrian bridges that sort of cut off that side from, bringing equipment in. So that's another challenge with the third side as well. So I appreciate any feedback, and hopefully we can move forward with the design. Thank you.
Mr. Thies, thank you very much. Any questions for our city engineer? Yes, Councilmember Tillman.
Thank you, Larry. Can you explain for everyone that's here and that's listening in what our other options are if we were not to move forward with this? What would we need to do with that trail?
Well, certainly you don't have to pursue federal reimbursement. I do anticipate you're going to have further erosion at these sites. Sites 1 and 2 have more lateral space, so it could erode further, and it may, part of them, each of those are on the edge of the trail, or in both those cases, it's a rock access road. So you could allow it to scour further, but at this point, you do have an opportunity for federal fund reimbursement, which is a great, because if this, you could have a regular storm, this could happen, or a larger storm, but it's not a declared disaster, and the city is on the hook for addressing the repairs. So I do think this is an opportunity. Now, not everything may be eligible, so the local match is likely to be higher than 6.25% after you take in the totality of all the costs, but it is probably one of the best reimbursements you're going to get from a federal agency. There's no grants that are going to be even this level of low local match. So at the pinch point at the oak tree, I do think at some point it will erode further, that you'll have to close the trail, which is going to be very problematic. It's heavily used. So I do suggest we try to address it. Hopefully, we are running out of time because obviously we're going to go through another storm season and see what happens. And it's possible it could erode this winter and it's going to cut off. And we could consider some temporary fixes to get us to a full-blown project. But right now it's still open. People utilize it, but it is narrow. We've put out, the Public Works crews put out the orange sort of snow safety fencing. But I do think other elements we've looked at is because of the way the water sort of travels there, trying to address any obstacles in the creek, vegetation-wise, is another thing we've looked at. And so we've tried to trim a tree or a bush to try to let the water flow more straight as opposed to going along that edge. But that's probably a little bit of window dressing relative to a storm, that we get typically every year. It's still going to rush down there, even in a not so big storm like we got last year, but even a regular storm, you'll see the creek will be rushing through there pretty quick.
Mm-hmm. And then I know we had a Trails and Landscape Committee meeting last week, and they agreed that this was something that you should bring forward to the council. Yes. Can you explain how come the money is not coming from the LMD?
Sure. Thank you for reminding me that, Councilman Tillman. Yes, we actually, because the city does have a Trails and Landscape Committee, we presented it at your subcommittee or the committee before, and got their buy-in as well. So their recommendation is to also spend the upfront money until you can get reimbursed, because it is a trail, impact to the trails. The dollar amounts that we were basically trying to, or proposing, we understand is basically it's dollars that you have to front. Right now, the Landscape Maintenance District is underfunded in terms of operation costs, so it would be difficult to take those dollars out of the LMD without having some other effect on the current operations. So long term, I think if you're floating the money or fronting the money, having it come out of a reserve, and we understand there's been one-time ARPA money that is now part of the reserve, that may be the most appropriate place to maybe bridge the gap for probably about 2 years that you're going to have to cover the costs until you get full reimbursement from FEMA.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Tripliano.
Thank you, Larry. I've got a couple of questions around this. I walk the trail probably 3 or 4 times a week, so I'm very familiar with, what's going on there. So we started the FEMA reimbursement process after the state declared an emergency. And so is this part of that FEMA reimbursement process where now we're kind of going into phase 2, looking for a civil engineer to do the planning and design? Is this like something FEMA saying, okay, you've made it through the first
They don't
pass?
they don't define it specifically into like phases. I would say most of the FEMA reimbursement process is broken into 2 categories. One is what they call, their terms, category A and B, which is debris removal and emergency protection measures. These are things that are done essentially within the storm period, like literally as the storm's going on. Are you bringing out someone to cut a tree down or move dirt, those elements? So the city has already applied for the reimbursement for those dollars. So like removing silt out of some of the basins in the GAD are covered under debris removal. Now we get basically 100% reimbursement for things that are done within the storm event, within, I believe, the first 30 days. Anything beyond that, which like some of the debris removal, which makes sense because you want it to dry out and be able to get in there, those get reimbursed at 75% plus the state. So it could be the same thing where the city covers about a little over 6%. So those are considered like early, event emergency protection measure. Then there's what's called basically permanent repairs. They have a bunch of different categories. Trails fall under category G, was like recreation, be like a park. And so any permanent repairs fall into that same ratio. And then they have to go through the process of mitigation. If you want to do something of an upgrade, they'll approve it, or putting it back exactly how it was. And then they have a team that basically does a field review, which was already done for the permanent repairs. They do the dimensions, and then another team evaluates your proposed fix and making sure the dollar amounts are reasonable. There's a threshold of essentially $1 million. Things that are over $1 million go through a different process. We're under $1 million, and they call streamline. It's still a lot of steps of vetting, but the dollar amount is fixed. Basically, the ratio doesn't matter as much. Once they determine the dollar amount, they don't want to change it. So we need to be good on our number, if not a little bit higher, just to make sure we cover ourselves when we're under $1 million, is how they've explained it to me. So I don't know if that answered any question.
No, yes, that does answer it. I just wanted to see where we were in the process that we started several months ago. And another question on the civil engineering firm. So I have 2 questions around that. I don't know if you have a firm in mind where you kind of got this guesstimate from. And also, would that portion for the planning and design be reimbursable at an earlier point, or is it at the completion of the entire project?
FEMA, when it's less than $1 million, it's at the completion of the project. So that is kind of another trade-off. When it is a much larger, they would break it into phases, but the scale of things here is small, right? I mean, we're not talking about a huge like hurricane that came through that. So it is unlikely. We could certainly inquire, for cash flow purposes, but generally speaking, under $1 million, they want the completed project before they would do the reimbursement to the city.
And you have a firm in mind that specializes in
Well, we could do a solicitation. We could do more of a direct request for proposals. And we do need to find a firm that's got experience with creek bank repairs and understands the permitting challenges, if not has someone in-house to be able to do the permitting type, both not only studies, but be able to negotiate the permits. But that could be done through a sub-consultant that's, there are firms that just do just permitting. There's a lot of firms. I do have a few in mind that I've worked with in the past that are very used to using, doing creek work. We currently don't have a sub-consultant under our team that has that feature. I outreached to our current one and asked, do you have someone? And they said, yeah, we're not really equipped for this type of project, so I'm going to be looking for someone outside of our current team.
Okay, so we might do an RFP
Yes,
for that?
we can. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's a matter of timing.
Right.
I would suggest we could do I would say we do a short solicitation of a proposal and a rough scope of cost and a scope of work and cost, and then ask, and then compare those and make a selection.
And so that leads into my next question. Just have two more. Can you go back to that timing again? You said generally it's 18 months after the occurrence, which was January. So you're looking at July 2024. But then I think you said something about construction between April and October of 2025.
Yes.
So is that too late for us to get reimbursed?
We're going to have to request an extension from that 18-month deadline.
And is that
that's
likely?
their standard. I don't think it accounts for work within a creek, especially in California. If we can get into the creek that early, we will certainly try. But it is my guess, based on prior projects, putting any kind of rock into a creek always solicits a debate among the permit agencies and requires usually design alternative analysis done before they'll accept that potential proposal. There could be a more softer approach that use vegetation, but the Site 3 is very tight. There's not a lot of options you can propose there without having to take more right-of-way. And in my opinion, that's probably going to be the reason why we propose. I mean, there's a reason why there's gabion baskets there today. I'm not sure if those were permitted, before. And so that's something that we'll have to go through that process. I know we have to go through. FEMA doesn't give you an emergency at this point, right? It's been almost a year. You still have to get your regular permitting. So we will be requesting that extension. Not unheard of. Lots of projects for repair, especially within waterways, have this same issue. But we will have to get that granted. And so that's something that we'll be working closely with FEMA and say, look, we're spending the dollars. We don't want to get to a point where you just say no.
Right.
And we've already spent dollars for design and that sort of stuff. So we'll be very clear on that element.
And then it's almost like you're queuing me up for my next and last question, which is something that I mentioned several months ago. And because I know that basket rock wall, whatever it's called, has eroded before. It's a very, very narrow path there to begin with. There is that giant oak tree to the left, or right, whichever way you're coming from. And so I mentioned at one point, and I know it's expensive, but about putting in another bridge there so that you have a more permanent structure, so we're not repairing, and there's more erosion. And I know there's federal infrastructure dollars out there. Is that even a remote possibility?
I think we could look at it as an alternative. It will depend on FEMA accepting the cost increase. But honestly, with the environmental aspects, maybe that is less impactful environmentally, and you're allowing the creek to potentially run. Now, you could have a different type of problem later, but I'm assuming you're envisioning a type of pedestrian bridge that runs parallel along the creek that kind of bridges over the scour point at this point.
Right, which we have a series of
Yes.
along that trail. So.
The difficulty would be is getting that bridge in and be able to place it.
Right.
Because you would have to cross the creek or potentially crane it from the other side of the creek on the golf course side.
Right.
And usually they're prefabbed and they're one segment, so you're literally lifting and dropping it in.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? Oh, go ahead.
Okay, let's see. Just a couple follow-ups from what you had mentioned. So you said that the city typically would front the money, and I think you said it takes 2 years or however long it takes. So we're essentially going to be floating it for that amount of time for the cost of the entire project right now.
I would plan that way, yes.
Okay, so right now this is for 200, but best estimate is 500.
And
Or
let
maybe
me
not
be
best
clear,
estimate.
we have not done
Yeah.
any engineering evaluation, so this is a number I'm really just kind of
Yeah.
eyeballing.
I'll rephrase, not
Yeah.
best estimate, an estimate.
Yes, I think that's fair.
Okay. So then you also mentioned something about of eligible cost can be reimbursed. What determines eligibility, and like what portion of the spend is typically considered eligible for reimbursement?
The easiest example is if the city decides to want to add, say a bridge, they say no, but we really want a bridge. They could determine a dollar amount that would cost to put gabion baskets in. And they could say that's the amount we would give you, and you could still spend it on a, you could build your bridge, but you got to pay the difference essentially. It's if there's any say for example, this another one I can see is the trail right now is a dirt path, but we want to put an asphalt on it. They wouldn't reimburse that element because it wasn't there originally, and that would not be an element that sort of mitigates the future. That's just a betterment for the trail. Those are rough examples, I would say, that could be ineligible costs that are added to a project that, since we're there as a city, we want to make sure we're doing these elements that are, for the best interest of the trail system. And, if the city wants to add something, then it may not be an eligible cost.
Okay, so that that helps clarify, because it's not. I was thinking that it could be things like overhead is ineligible or something like that. Is that that's a pretty broad category, and so obviously there's going to be management. There's going to be other stuff that is.
So that's a great question. There is a percentage specifically set aside for overhead. I can't remember the exact percent. It's a small percent of the entire. So it's a one-time. They don't really want to keep track. So we will have to manage that and make sure we're not on especially my time. I'm considered really the overhead in this being the manager as opposed to the designer. So we are keeping track of that already. And then we have to make sure that, we don't overspend that percentage of the total dollar amount.
Okay, no, that's helpful. When we're talking about spend and reimbursement, essentially floating the cost, do we ever get indication along the way that our project would qualify and that they may require us to spend money first, but they say, well, you've been approved, you just need to finish it first? Or is it essentially a risk where they could wait to the end and then not approve?
The design will be approved. So I think probably the where you may have some risk is depending on, I don't believe this whole 200,000 would be at risk. We need to develop an initial cost estimate and basically a preliminary design that they can start chewing on essentially to be able to say, okay, we get why you're trying to do this mitigation element. They're probably not going to get in the weeds about, well, this isn't structurally this. It's really is it make sense that they're asking for rock here? Probably is, in my opinion, but that's what they really need to, sort of vet. And then we get that feedback from their mitigation specialists. That will help, right? So they could say, okay, yeah, they should add these other elements, and that would be eligible. Simply just putting it back is simple, but probably foolhardy on everyone's part because it will just probably erode again without any changes. So yes, we will have some checkpoints as to what they will cover from a design standpoint.
Okay, yeah, and I guess the thing that I would be weary of is going deep on cost and then not being able to get reimbursed.
Understood.
So just as long as, I don't know where the gates are on each stage.
Yeah, and I don't know exactly where that gate is with FEMA. You know, I do think there are checkpoints. I recognize we want to minimize our capital design cost outlay to as minimal as they need to be able to give us feedback that we're okay going forward with the design.
Yeah, I think my precise question is, what is the minimum level of effort needed to continue with the reimbursement process? So that's essentially what I'm getting at.
No, that's fair. I think if we wanted to sort of do this in piecemeal, you know, or stages, a better way to say it, I would recommend an authorization about 50,000 at this time to be able to, and I don't even know I don't think that will be. Well, I'll take that back. I would say 50,000 would be good to be able to get studies started. It'll probably get us to the point of a good cost estimate. Now, it could be lower, and we could go to whatever amount you feel comfortable with. I do think 25 would probably be the bare minimum, and then I could come back, or and after we get more feedback from both FEMA and then get authorization from the council. So, yes, this 200,000 is what I anticipate would be the sort of entire cost to get you to, construction plans. But we do have to move along into the process. So, I'm open to whatever the council would like to do relative to this project. I do think we haven't really committed yet, and FEMA is starting to say, well, are you going to do something? So we're at this point now where we need to, we have to hire someone to do some design, or otherwise we have nothing to show to the FEMA group.
Okay. How likely is it to get the extension that you talked about? Because, I mean, the timing that we're at, we'll never hit it. So
I think it's likely because we're not going to be the only one that's working at a creek in this area, and I can pretty much guarantee you that we will not be the only one. But we could try to get more assurances as well. But I do think
as part of the gates that we're talking about,
I think we need to show the design first before we really, and they're going to also need to. These are folks that are from all around the United States. They're not used to California permitting. And so we're going to have to engage the permitting agencies for them to start saying, hey, we got a problem with this, problem with that, and we can't give you a permit. Hear from them directly. So that way FEMA understands, look, it's not Clayton that's holding this thing up. There's a lot of steps with the permitting departments.
Okay. And then I guess my last thing is, you had mentioned the Gavian walls, and then I think we talked about other, bridge or whatnot. Are you at a point where you have multiple options you're considering, or are we not there yet, and then you have to
I want the consultant to help come up with those alternatives. I would say what I've simply put in order to keep the process going is a Gabion basket and rock slope protection at this point. But the consultant could do now. The alternatives cost money, right? So the more you want to, and I would ask them, hey, are there alternatives that help us that work better environmentally, that helps us get through this process? That's what we need to know. And there may be a bridge, could be a possibility, or a sheet pile is simpler than excavating it out, but you're literally driving it through the ground. That's going to tear up the roots too. And you have to bring a crane out to drop the sheet pile, so it's not easy either. So there could be other alternatives. And I don't have all the, there's folks that it's called fluvial geomorphology. Basically, they're creek guys that do this stuff. So that could come up with better alternatives than I would come up with.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
Just to follow up to that, so would those alternatives be included in the whatever initial amount it is that we authorize? Or would that be up to the 200,000 that you had?
Whatever amount you put, I would say it'll just be, we'll get to that point, we'll have to come back. I think alternatives would be in that first, $25,000 to $50,000, because that's going to be one of the first things that need to be looked at. So it's just, you're just not spending much on design yet. You're really figuring out very basic alternative analysis.
And then how difficult is it for them to reach, for you to have contact with them? Is it, I don't know if you've been listening to our conversations about HCD that we've been having with Dana, but are they easy to get in contact with when you have their ear? Is it
The regulatory
weeks?
agencies?
Whoever we need to finish the design, and if you have to come back to us and it's delaying it, are we jeopardizing being able to have you have another meeting with them to continue the process?
I think you're probably more referring to FEMA. No, they've been pretty active. I do think as disasters stack up, it gets further and further away, and they get moved to Florida for the hurricane or something. So it will become less and less sort of regular service or regular meetings. Like I meet with them right now every 2 weeks.
Okay.
And that's worked pretty well. And we have got to the stage where the sort of the emergency protection and debris removal has been processed. We focused on that first at their request. So hopefully those dollars are coming back soon. They're asking us to sign off on stuff now. So that's in the range of I think 53,000. So that will help put some money back into the city. But that still could be, weeks or maybe a months away. I'm not sure when they actually pull the trigger and write the check, so that I can't speak to.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, this is an action item, and I'm going to now open it up for public comment. Do we have anybody online or a card on file?
No hands raised and no cards.
Thank you so much. Bring it back, close the public comment portion, and bring it back to the city council for action, where we are to approve or authorize this $200,000 of general fund reserves to initiate civil engineering design, environmental permitting, consultant services, and so forth.
I like the idea of a staged authorization at a lower amount if it gives you enough runway to do what you need to do. If the $50,000 range is, if you're comfortable with that.
That's fine. I think that would be reasonable for us to get to, I would say generally a few more months. Hopefully in spring of next year, we'll have at least firmer commitment as to the project, and then also an extension potentially. So that's fine.
It'll give us more information.
Yep.
At that point,
I like that too. And will that also include that we'll have a civil engineering firm on board at that time, or?
I think most of this 50,000 would be spent on engineering. There'll probably be a little bit toward permitting, because we'll get to the point where we need to start showing, this design approach to the regulatory agencies. But the initial focus would be more engineering related. So I think we can make it work within the 50,000 to get to a point where we're not going to run out of money before we need to come back and have at least more information to explain or more feedback from FEMA to be able to let the council know where they stand.
And would that mean no RFP at this time with the 50,000, or there still would be an RFP process going on?
Well, I would say in terms of the RFP, we can make it more formal to try to gather more folks, but it takes usually more time, right? If you want good feedback, you want to put it out for a month, the minimum. So, you're essentially going to be out that time, which is fine because you may get better proposals and maybe better costs. I'm happy to take feedback from the council, and now I'll advise you that I'll be preparing it, so you're going to end up paying my time to prepare it as well. So
right.
I've done a lot of them, so it's not a ton, but I think based on the scale of this project, it's not gigantic, but it is complicated because you got to deal with the regulatory agencies. So I have definitely a short list of folks that I would solicit, request, send out the RFQ/RFP and hopefully get a proposal back. So that way, I think everyone feels a little more comfortable having, like 3 proposals, hopefully. I don't know if you'll get that, honestly.
Okay.
But that would be one alternative. Another is I could look for someone to sub-consult through my firm directly, and still do, sort of a more informal proposal process, but I'm happy to take your feedback.
Okay.
But 50,000 will get us to that point.
Yeah, I think, we will have to solicit the design element too.
Right.
So, I won't say it's a $50,000 budget.
Right.
I have $50,000 runway initially, but, reality is I would, instead of doing a whole nother solicitation for a designer, I would just package it as, okay, I want you to do the alternative analysis, and then I need you to design it. Otherwise, we're going to get an alternative, and then I'm going to say, hey, take this sort of sketch and give me a design, and then that's another process. It could be a different consultant. I would suggest you just, the scale of this does it warrant like a multi-phase process.
And also, if we have another wet winter like we did earlier this year, there might be no trail. Like, we have to do something. I mean, I think it's imperative.
Well, I understand, like, it just probably takes one big storm, and once that's knocked out, you're going to have a lot of constituents asking, when is this getting reopened? And so
They
the
already
urgency
are.
ratchets up much faster. I recognize the urgency is relatively low because people can still walk through. So I would say if you want to pursue a more formal RFP, we could do that. But if we have a storm that just knocks it out, then we pivot at that point.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, Larry.
I would actually be more inclined to give him the runway and authorize the 200,000 with the caveat that you don't clearly use it all, but at least you have the leeway to use it and come back to us at a future meeting to give us updates on how it's progressing with FEMA. And I do like the idea of getting multiple RFP bids if you can and packaging it up. Obviously, like you just said, we can pivot if there's a storm, but I would like us to at least have all those steps in place. And I don't know, you can tell me, if I'm FEMA, I would rather see that there's more of a commitment from the city to actually fix this and get reimbursed, as opposed to, I don't want to call it piecemeal, but doing it in stages and having to come back. That's why I wanted to know, with you having their ear and you're having a conversation with them, you can say the city's committed to doing X amount, and these are the things that they've asked me to bring back to them at these timelines. But that, you guys can opine on how you guys feel.
I would just add that I have not really discussed with FEMA sort of the level of commitment from the city, so it hasn't really come up. However, their expectation is it should be done as quickly as possible. They know that we're going to ask for an extension, but, in very, I guess, normal fashion, they say, well, we'll deal with that when we get to that point. They're not going to give assurances this early. I would say however the council wants to approach it, I do think we're going to need to come back and report. It is a pretty impactful project because we're going to have to close the trail too when we fix it. So that's another element that, the community needs to know is it's impossible to keep it open. I'm pretty sure, even with a bridge, right? It might be shorter time period of closure versus another alternative. But like I said, I'm happy to go. Any approach you'd like to do is fine.
Yeah, my concern is that I don't want to get too deep and have the risk of them scuttling the reimbursement. And to the extent that we can do what needs to be done in a way that doesn't hamper your efforts, and provide you the runway that you need to do that, but at the same time, stage it so that we are active, so that we're getting it's kind of like, I'll show you mine if you show me yours thing, where we're both, the city and FEMA are working or moving in tandem so that we don't get too far ahead of ourselves. And so I don't know if that is a thing, but, because it's uncertain, the reimbursement, it's uncertain on the not eligibility, it's uncertain on whether or not they would approve it, it's uncertain on what would count, it's uncertain on when, like, there's a lot of those pieces. And so if we can move together so that the funding comes with the assurances over time, that seems to be more comfortable.
Yeah, I understand. I don't think it's so much the dollar amount, honestly. I think it's really the council's commitment to wanting to pursue this now. We're running out of time, essentially. So I think maybe the commitment or the sort of the potential exposure is lower, right? But I think what I really need is the council saying, okay, yeah, we need to go hire someone, start this design, and if it's $50,000 for the next 2 months or whatever time period, then that's fine, and come back. But we need to start the design process, or at least the alternatives kind of process, to be able to get the information FEMA needs, so that way they can not start to threaten, like, you don't need this project apparently, and we're going to move on. Because I think it's more just they want progress, and it's not so much like the creek is fixed this way or that way. Based on my discussions, honestly, with them, they don't spend a lot of time thinking about that, because you have so many disasters. It's really about, okay, are they doing, is it insurable? There's very specific steps. That's what these folks are not really mostly engineers. There's a few engineers who do the specific review, but the day-to-day people are process management, and then that's what they're pushing. We got to get to the next step, and those type of things.
Thank you. You have a amended motion that you're going to make, or you? What's your pleasure?
Yeah, I mean, I think as long as you are comfortable that it doesn't hamper your process, then I would stick with what I said earlier and move forward with authorizing the 50,000. And then as you need it, I think you will quickly get approval as things proceed. And you should be able to monitor your runway for that.
That's fine. I can work with that. It's not a problem.
Okay, so, yep,
Yeah.
Is that your motion?
Yep.
Okay.
And I'll second it.
And it's been moved and seconded, first by Councilmember Juan and seconded by Vice Mayor Trupiano. Would you please take the roll?
Councilmember Cloven is absent. Councilmember Tillman.
Aye.
Councilmember Juan.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Tripiano.
Aye.
And Mayor Diaz.
Yes, thank you. Okay, we now move on to action item 9C, which is to dissolve the Concerts in the Grove Oversight Committee and appoint members to the city-sponsored Special Events Committee, which, just for the edification of everybody, that will include not only the concert oversight, but also the 60th anniversary of this founding of Clayton, or the incorporation, the concerts, and of course the car shows. And thank you. City Manager Amy.
I'm not sure how much more I can elaborate because you did a pretty good job summarizing it. But this, just for the record, this is a follow-up conversation from a series of conversations where we're looking at consolidating efforts, really making good use of City Council's time. This item in particular is just to dissolve the Concerts in the Grove Oversight Committee with the understanding that the subsequent item after this is going to speak to the concert series specifically.
Excellent. Okay. Any discussion from the council members? Okay. This is an action item, so I am going to open it for public comment. And if we have any cards or online people.
No cards and no raised hands.
Okay, thank you very much. So closing public comment on this item, and we'll bring it back to the City Council for action.
So I think this is consistent with what prior discussions here. So I guess I would just move that I'm looking at the recommendation here. I would move that we dissolve the Concerts in the Grove Oversight Committee and then create we already created it. So then, yeah, it's already been created. So I don't think we need to do that. But then I would designate myself and Vice Mayor Trupiano to be members of this committee. I'm not sure if we're doing it in this agenda item or the following, but the way that the item reads,
Yeah, I
it
just
looks like
realized
it's here.
that as I was reading it. So action item 9C is really just about the dissolution of the Oversight Committee, with the understanding that the next action item will then give you an opportunity to appoint members specifically for that in the larger
Because it
scheme.
says and appoint.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I'm just trying to
And that's-
follow the,
Yeah.
sure.
And
So
that's
that
why
would
I
be my
just thought it
motion.
was odd that it was a separate item unto itself and not part of the committee discussion in item 9D, but
So that's my motion. Is that clear?
yes.
All right.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded again by, moved by Councilmember Juan and seconded by Vice Mayor Trupiano. Would you please rule the roll call?
Councilmember Cloven is absent. Councilmember Tillman.
Aye.
Councilmember Juan.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Trupiano.
Aye.
And Mayor Diaz.
Aye as well. Okay, thank you. That concludes item number 9C. And we now move into item number 9D, which is discuss and approve city council committees and assignments for standing ad hoc committees and liaison positions. City manager.
So for item 9D, you should see in your packet that there is a chart, shows the current year assignments, and then there was an open space for nominations and appointments to the 2024 cycle for each of the events. I'm not sure exactly how you want to go about this, if you just want to run down the list, Mayor Diaz, and show the preliminary information that you've collected from the council members about their desired appointments. Does that work for you?
But that supplemental is also online, right? It's on our city website, the 2024 main and alternate is
The
a supplemental.
2023.
Well, no, 2023 is in our packet, 2024 is online under city council agendas as a supplement.
Oh, that's right, because
Yeah.
we had received information about requested assignments. That's right, we added that.
Any other questions for city management? None, okay. Again, action item, so I will open it for public comment. Anybody with online or a card?
Neither.
Of course, thank you very much. 90, no public comment. Okay, we're bringing it back up for finalization with the city council. Anybody wish to make a comment?
So I'm looking at the supplemental, and I guess with the exception of, hold on.
Yeah, put your glasses on.
Age is terrible. So we just, in the prior item, we did the city-sponsored events. And I think the internship one at the bottom here, that was an idea that we had last year, but I think given the level of activity that's going on right now, especially with just in totality, that will probably not have legs this year, so we may not need to do that one. And then we did just do the garbage and recycling contract renewal, and I think that was like a 10-year renewal. So I'm not sure if we even need this committee any further, and that would be my only comments on this as proposed here. And actually, and the GAD we talked about earlier, so the GAD is a little different than this list. So we had Councilmember Cloven in absentee was appointed to be the chair there, and so that's a slight difference.
Okay.
But if so that was my thing. I I'd probably just scuttle the garbage and recycling committee because we probably won't need that for a while. And then also the internship program, we can pick that up when we have the bandwidth.
I agree. Yep.
So is that your motion?
Well, that's my suggestion. I'm
Okay.
just open to
Okay.
feedback.
The only other feedback aside from those that I have is I only see Councilmember Cloven on TransPac as a main, besides the Do the Right Thing. Did he have other requests that he wanted, since
Nope,
he's not here?
That's what he gave me as his top two.
Oh, we were only taking top two? Okay,
And GAD, right? He's chairing the GAD.
Yeah.
okay.
I think it looks good.
And then for the ones that have slashes, is that supposed to be the alternate? How are we reading the Clayton Finance Authority where it says Juan/Diaz?
I believe that one has a requirement that it's two folks as part of this financing authority charter. Like it requires two people.
That's correct.
So
Okay, and then what about the sports park?
that could be listed as a main alternate. I think that'd be more appropriate and consistent with the other committees. So.
Okay, and then just got rid of that one. Do you want to take point on the school district one then? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah,
You've got
I see what
different-
you mean. I think because of your work with Do the Right Thing, you're probably more, should probably be on point on that one, if you're comfortable
On the
with
school
that.
district one?
Yeah, if you're
I'm
comfortable.
fine with the school district one. I already do it now. That's fine. So then, does that mean you're the alternate, or is Cloven the alternate?
I don't have a preference. I mean, Peter is also, partnered with you on Do the Right Thing, so it may make sense for him to be the alternate. And we could,
It's fine.
yeah, we could.
And
deliberate
then we got rid of the other ones. The only other thing that I belatedly sent in, because I did not send it by 5 p.m.
Yes, I got
the
it
mayor-
Saturday afternoon.
You did. Is for I would like to be the alternate on the sports field one. That's the only other thing that I had put in my request.
I think that's fine.
So
Like
who's,
because
who's
right
main?
now it has you as the alternate. If you want to trade, I think that is.
Okay, wait a minute.
I would like to be the alternate on the sports field. He would be the main,
Okay.
which means you would not this one. Right here. It would be
Yeah, can we,
Jeff
yeah,
and then me.
okay, that's fine.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so then that's the only other change that we would be making.
So we made like 8 changes there. Did you get all that?
I was going to ask if we could memorialize the ones where there are changes,
Sure.
just so that we.
I'll do a rundown.
And I
Have it on the
guess,
record.
quite honestly, I'm not sure why we even have persons on the.
I think it was a historical artifact.
All right,
That's-
okay, well,
you're-
that's fine.
You're right.
I-
And all of this was pulled from the prior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
so.
So, okay, so let me see if I could clarify and correct if I get
Recap.
this wrong. Okay, so I would move that we approve the committee assignments as indicated in the supplemental with the following changes. One by one. The community park sports field, the main will be myself, with the alternate being Councilmember Tillman. We will eliminate the garbage and recycling committee. Now I'm going slowly. We will eliminate the internship training committee. We will
You have to change
modify
that.
the Mount Diablo School District Liaison to be
Yes.
Councilmember Tillman to be
Right.
the primary and Councilmember Cloven to be the alternate.
The alternate, okay, so we're removing your name off of that,
Yes.
all right?
And then the GAD, the main is Councilmember Cloven with myself, I guess, as the
As vice chair.
vice chair. And I think that is the extent of all of the differences from the supplemental. And that would be my motion.
Okay? Anything else that needs modification on this?
I thought there was one
Was there,
more.
did I miss one?
Because we never talked about it. The Budget Audit Standing Committee has the slash again.
That's true.
Without a main and an alternate.
I think we don't need an alternate for that,
For which?
for the budget audit. Essentially, it's just two people, and we do not need an alternate.
So who are the two?
Myself and Councilmember Tripiano.
Okay.
So we could eliminate Mayor Diaz as the listed alternate. So that is actually my motion.
Okay,
So is
I'll
the
second it.
documenters keeping up with all these changes?
We're all clear, yes.
Okay, and we're recording it anyway, so you could play it back.
We have
Okay.
good notes.
Anything else?
No, and she seconded.
I seconded
We
it.
got a motion
Yep.
Yes,
from Juan, and we have
a
a
second.
second from Trupriano. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Cloven is absent. Councilmember Tillman,
Aye.
Councilmember Juan,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Tripiano,
Aye.
and Mayor Diaz.
Yes. Okay, that takes care of the action items. Thank you so much. We're moving forward here. Now we're going to go item number 10, which is for council items limited to requests and directives for future meetings. Councilmember Tillman.
Yep, I would like to request at a future meeting that we discuss all of the special districts and just get a rundown on how all of them work and the timing of them, the reporting for them, just more clarity. Because sometimes it seems that when we get to some of the meetings, there's surprises on what's happening in them. And so that's my request for that. And then my repeated request for us to discuss allowing the city attorney to open an investigation into council behavior, et cetera, and possible censorship. I don't know why that's a tongue twister.
Thank you. Anything else? Closing item 10. Item number 11A, which is our council reports of all of our great activities that we've done since our last get-together. Councilmember Juan.
I've spoken quite a bit with residents regarding a number of activities around the city, done a lot of email with that. There's been quite a lot of conversation about, I guess, the relatively low amount of homeless that we have in town and activity around that. And so been discussing some of those items with our chief. That's my report.
Thank you. Councilmember Tillman.
Thank you, Mayor. On December 6th, I participated in a second Stop the Hate seminar for the League of California Cities with Kevin Wilk from Walnut Creek, Lily May from Fremont, Cesar Zepeda from Richmond, and Tessa Rudnick was the moderator again, and she's from El Cerrito. Later that day, I attended the East Bay Division of the League of California Cities retreat, and that's to discuss our 2024 goals. On December 7th, I attended the CBCA Member Volunteer Appreciation Dinner, which was a great event that was put on up at Oakhurst, so we were pleased to support them. December 9th and 10th, I attended the menorah lighting downtown with the mayor. On the 11th, I attended the TLC meeting and welcomed new member Mike Wells, but he just left, I think. And we discussed our mid-year planning and strategies there. And you also heard the update from Larry when we were discussing that. On the 12th, I attended the League of California Cities Community Services Policy Committee. We had a planning session with myself as the chair and the vice chair and our legislative lobbyist, and we were discussing our agenda for 2024. Our first meeting is going to be in January, and we will have local members that are well-versed and advocates for our aging population. And I will give more details on that meeting as we finalize the date. I believe it's January 18th, if I'm not mistaken. On the 13th, I attended a Clayton Pride meeting. On the 14th, attended the East Bay Division of the League of California Cities holiday reception. Congrats to Sam Cagill, who did a wonderful job with preparing that and planning it. On the 16th, I attended the Wreaths Across America with the mayor. I'll let him give more details on that. And then my request for the mayor is if we can please close tonight's meeting in honor of Allie McCauley, she was a local family here. Mark and Sandy McCauley are her parents, and she passed away yesterday after a long, courageous battle with cancer. That was last year. So if we can close out in her memory tonight, that'd be great.
Vice Mayor Trupiano.
Thank you. Yes, I was able to attend the menorah lighting 3 times that week, the 7th, the 8th, and the 13th, and I really enjoyed it. It was very joyous, and the organizers did a great job. I also had a discussion with one of our constituents about ADA improvements in the city, and I particularly spoke to him about improvements for his child's path to the elementary school, and then had a follow-up discussion with our city manager and city engineer. I'm hoping that we can make that one of our goals for 2024. And then yesterday, I had my East Contra Costa County Habitat Conservancy board meeting, and I will be the incoming chair next year. And again, the Habitat Conservancy, along with the cities of Oakley and Pittsburgh, Brentwood, and unincorporated counties, protects our open spaces, our endangered species, and works hand in hand with organizations like the East Bay Parks District and Save Mount Diablo. And so more to come on that for 2024. Thank you.
Thank you. And mine are unfortunately a little bit longer, but I got some things that we did. First of all, on the 6th, I was at the County Connection Operations and Scheduling Committee. That's one where we make sure the buses are staffed and working very well. That is working fine. On the 7th, attended the Mayor's Conference in San Ramon, and it was a lovely evening. Very minimal reporting because everybody wanted to have a holiday fair. From the 8th through the 14th, I was very blessed to be part of the Hanukkah presentation, or the lighting for the menorah at the corral. And I want to particularly call out Claude Heifetz, who is the presider over that. Along with, we had 2 other special guests that came in throughout the event. One from the congregation, B'nai Shalom. That was Stuart Kirsch, who is executive director, and a very wonderful evening with Hazan Sandy Bernstein. She's a cantor at the B'nai Shalom, and she presented us with a whole book of songs for Hanukkah, and it was a wonderful evening. There were children out there. I have to compliment the police department. They had well represented, and it was really important that they were there. There's a lot of things happening with the Jewish community, and we wanted to make sure we didn't have ours end up like others. Sergeant Shaw, Sergeant Richania, Officer Mitch Strokski, Kevin McCracken, and Kelsey Wiggins. And I want to particularly point out Officer Kelsey Wiggins. On one of the evenings, first of all, these events started at 5 p.m., and it was very dark on a couple of those nights. And there's very minimal lighting crossing from the Grove Park over to the corral. And one of the attendees was walking across the street, and we saw a car coming from the direction of Center Street towards the corral. If it hadn't been for Officer Kelsey standing out there, full view, that gentleman or lady would have hit that person, come flying through there. So I mentioned it to Larry earlier, but in addition to these traffic signal type walking things like you see over in Concord or Walnut Creek, lighting may be another consideration, so we need to think about that in the future. But it was a wonderful series of events. It's one of those things that really brought out to me what a great small town feel we have. I know you were there, and I know Holly was there, but just to have those people, the community, it's been, quite frankly to me, invisible to our community, but they are very present, and they had a marvelous turnout. Great small town feel. Happy we did it, and look forward to next year. Okay, on the 9th, went to the celebration of life for former mayor and city councilman Bob Kendall over here, right here at Hoyer Hall. Bob passed away age 79. We closed the meeting in his honor last. Another great small town field meeting that I went to was on the 11th. That was the Contra Costa Mineral and Gem Society, where they host their meeting over at Endeavor Hall, and I was honored to swear in all their new officers, president, 2 vice presidents, secretary treasurer, and then their national representative. Great evening. We even had a special visitor that night. He was there on a Saturday night over there at the Grove Park as well, but he came over. Santa Claus came over to say hello to us. Anyway, then on the 13th, I want to make mention I got invited over to the Clayton Museum for their holiday display, which Nancy Niemeyer had put together. And you can go there tomorrow from 2 until 4 and see the amazing cards and other decorations that they put up that bring back again what Clayton is. On the 16th, Council Member Tillman and I were over at the Wreaths Across America, and that was at the Memorial Gardens. And I want to compliment again VFW Post 1525 and Mark Steinberg, who coordinate that. And finally, today I had a meeting with the acting city manager, Amy, on tonight's agenda and a variety of other things. That concludes item 11A. And now we're going to adjourn and go into closed session for a conference with our labor negotiator per Government Code Section 54957.6 and our agency designated representative, represented tonight by Amy, as opposed to Brett, who's still under the weather, by the way. And we'll be meeting with her, and it's regarding the employee organization, the Clayton Police Officers Association. And they had a marvelous dinner over at the La Veranda on Sunday night. I was not in there. We were outside with some other people from the Historical Society, and it was a great event. I mean, that back room was filled with everybody from the department, and they had a marvelous time exchanging gifts and so forth. We're going to adjourn now at 9:40.
And Mayor Diaz, if I
wait a
may
minute.
make an announcement, just that the council is leaving for closed session, and we will end the Zoom meeting, but anybody who wants to stick around online on the live stream will get the report out after the meeting's over.
Okay, thank you, and we will go out. Nope, Holly has something to.
It was just my request from earlier to close out tonight in honor of Allie McCauley. I said it earlier during my comments.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. And we're going to adjourn now, go into closed session, and we'll be back at the end of that and give a readout. Thank you very much. Okay, we're coming back out of closed session, and there are no reportable items. And I'm going to ask Councilmember Tillman to give us the name of a person that recently passed away, and we would like to close the meeting in honor of that individual.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tonight, we are going to close out tonight's meeting in honor of Allie McCauley, who lost her battle with cancer yesterday.
Thank you, and we adjourn now until the meeting of the 19th of, the 16th of January, 2024. Is that right? There's a mistake on this. Anyway, because we canceled the meeting on January 2nd. We'll see you next year. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, Happy New Year.